Hello, everybody. This is Dean Val with Dean Kevin Smith and Jeremy and Tim. And today we're discussing the environmental awareness. And we have some comments to make today about what's going on with the environment. Very important, because this is our survival. This is what supports us: clean air, clean water, and clean food. So I'll give it over to Kevin here and see what he's brought back this week from environmental news. So give it to you, Kevin.
In regards to the permaculture principles that tell us to observe and interact and design from patterns to details. Water. Observing and seeing the patterns of water flow need to be developed before we can design for water on our sites. The water supply represents the potential for people to drink, to wash, to cook, for irrigating crops, the potential to generate electricity, to raise fish, and to grow a forest. The first rule when working with water is to keep it in its place of highest potential in the landscape, up high. A building, for example, the roof representing the highest point. With the right roofing materials, water can be directed into a storage tank for later use. The water never touching the ground will remain clean. The water flows by the force of gravity and directed to where you want it. The sides of the roof are like the slopes of a mountain. With this principle of water through gravity coming from the highest point, we think then to make the bare ground beneath and all the way down the mountains and hills covered in plants, and making the soil able to absorb water. Then we look for places to intercept the water with the least amount of effort and damage. With damaged land, we may need to do a little surgery to get the water to slow down. This may take the form of a swale or a ditch to intercept the water on the way down the slopes, to soak it more into the soils, or direct the water into ponds or reservoirs. If water motion is slowed, it absorbs more into the ground, slowly replenishing water tables and feeding streams down below, slowly sinking and spreading the water so it has more surface water contact with the earth, which will allow time for soils to become deeply saturated. Deeply wet soils can support trees and shrubs, which in turn can grow food, create habitat, block the wind, cast shade, produce firewood, attract bees, and provide building materials. The protection that trees provide causes less evaporation from sun and wind. The ground stays wetter for longer, and it feeds a cycle of rehydration. We start by planting the water high up and working our way down. Big water storages in a desert will have a lot of evaporation, but in the cool and cold regions and wet tropics, large open storages of water can have huge benefits. A series of interconnected reservoirs can prevent drought issues with farms and retain enough water to survive dry spells. in areas very mountainous, where the bottom doesn't drain, we can have huge swamps. The Aztecs, for example, built a vast series of islands called chinampas. They dug down into the muck of the canals and piled it up on the land, which were then planted and took root. To this day, the chinampas are productive gardens in Mexico City, which help feed the city. The canals are the transportation, and the fish can be caught in them too. Every time a canal is cleaned out, the mud and muck is piled on and used to fertilize the land. Wetlands have a natural capacity as filters. We find wetlands low down in the watershed, and they filter everything coming down. We can use this model to our advantage when using our own water treatment systems. Constructed wetlands, grey water systems are all types of biological treatments. Artificial wetlands to handle our waste water and use the biology of healthy soil and aquatic plants to break the bonds and absorb pollutants. We must use and protect the water for permaculture design to replenish and clean water and restore healthy hydrological cycles.
Water, really essential. This is a water planet. I'll describe what I'm doing here in Baja California, where it's rather dry. Although northern Baja is greener than the southern part, but it's still rather dry, very little rainfall. Maybe, like I said, we had maybe six days of rain here this winter. But I'm working this community garden here in La Mission on a hillside, and I've got 8 swales. You mentioned swales, and these are ditches dug along the contour of the hillside to catch the water, to slow it down, to sink it. And the swales are about 2 feet wide, about 1.5 feet deep. I put cardboard in the ditch and then put dried weeds and organic materials inside. Eventually that will break down. And when the water comes in, it'll hit the ditch and sink it, slow it down and sink it into this ditch. And then on the berm where I dig the soil out from the ditch, there's a berm on the lower side, and then I plant trees and shrubs and things on the berm. So this is a way to capture the water, to harvest it so that you don't lose it down the hillside. Like you said, Kevin, if it goes fast, it just runs, flash flood idea just runs away, and you don't get the benefit of it percolating down into the soil. So this is a way that it's been for ages have been used to capture it. So that's really good. In the video that I'm going to share, I think we're going to have some of that too. We're going to have some visuals and how the Native Americans use this process too. So thanks, Kevin. So we'll go on to Jeremy or Tim. You have anything?
Yeah, I got a couple things I'd like to share. And the other thing is I wanted to mention, I was doing research on water purification, because I like looking into that, because, drinking the purest water, we're mostly water. So I seen that one of the thing is Amphora. It's basically like an egg-shaped pot, and it has the same processes as essentially how our skin gets rid of toxins, how we sweat, because the clay is porous. When the water circulates around in it, because of the egg type shape, it'll pull all the contaminants to the outer shell, and then you can just wipe them off. So it's pretty cool, the process that it is, because the egg shape allows the water to heat, which rises up in a center column, and as it cools, it pushes the water back down. So then it's just this constant kind of flowing motion that actually keeps it alive instead of stagnant and whatchamacallit. And so been looking into that. It's pretty cool. And like how Kevin said, studying how water actually works, you know, you can actually work with it rather than sort of against it. Self-sufficient, everything they need is right there for them. They just get it. And they have other videos where they actually have a little herb farm. They go and they grow all kinds of mini greens and all kinds of stuff that they use. So I just wanted to share that with you guys.
That's fun. Where is this at?
Azerbaijan.
Okay, up there by Turkestan and Uzbekistan and yeah, the southern Russia. Mm-hmm. Sort of. The border of their planting bed look like reeds. That's what I use too. We have a lot of reeds in Baja, long reeds. They look like bamboo, but they're softer and you can bend them and use them for fencing or borders, things like that. That's really neat. We'll see what Tim, do you have anything to share?
I was thinking about how oxygen and hydrogen make the water. That might be a way to create our own water. That woman sure did a lot of picking. I know that takes time to gather all that stuff, and it sure looked like they had a lot of open country there where they live. It didn't look like they had very many neighbors, so they kind of had access to everything around them.
Now you picked mushrooms. You want to tell us about that a bit in your area?
Yeah, the mushrooms, right now, the morels are a pretty valuable mushroom. Everybody seems to like morels with butter and garlic, and they're paying like $25 a pound for them. And we had big burns here in Oregon again last summer and fall. And that's what, in certain areas where the ground is right for them and the moisture is right, they grow real plentifully in the burns. But then the controllers have closed all the national forests that got burned because they say, oh, it's a danger to the public to be out there because you could get hit by a burnt snag falling down. so they prevent everybody from getting to go out and harvest the morels. It is strange. It's pretty big business, actually, worldwide business, and it gets into the billions of dollars, the morels too. And at the same time, we have the Boletus, the king Boletus happen, and that's the main mushroom on the planet for the restaurants and the chefs in Europe. They use the Boletus. The weather has to be right too for them, because if it's too warm, then the flies lay their eggs on the Boletus as soon as they crack the duff and are exposed to where the flies can get at them when it's warm, and that spoils the Boletus. If it's cold enough, then the flies don't live and when they pop, but it just depends a lot on the weather for a lot of the vegetation, how it grows, or if there is a crop like the matsutakis, they won't come unless they get the certain environment at the right time. They have to have a certain amount of rain and a certain amount of light. The mushrooms are very interesting things that some are parasites. They live off a host, like the matsutake, the pine mushroom. And others, like the morels, they really flourish when there's been a burn and they have open area. If they get the right moisture, they're a succulent to have a big crop. Sometimes they cover giant areas, like in Colorado, when there's been a big burn and they get the right conditions for them to have an abundance of them. The natives used to burn the country deliberately just for the mushrooms. They would start the forest fires, which would burn the undergrowth. So it kept the undergrowth down, and also they harvest the mushrooms. So that way you don't get crown fires where it goes up, the stuff grows up high enough to cause all the limbs of the trees to catch on fire and kill them, then they all burn up. But when they keep the undergrowth burnt down, then they don't kill the forest. It doesn't cause the crown fires that wipe out the forests. And they get to harvest the morels in particular. Up in the far north, that's a big business too. Up around Dawson and the Northwest Territories, where they've had their fires, they grow very plentifully. People make like $50,000 a season just gathering the morels. And there's quite a market. The mushrooms are medicinal, many of them. They found out have things that are beneficial for certain ailments, and so they are very interesting. Just another part of the forest. But what man's doing to the forest in a giant scale in so many places like Canada and America has done, and they're wiping out the old growth forest pretty much on the West Coast. There's very little left of actual old growth forest that hasn't been destroyed. The way they do it in this modern day for the mass production of harvesting the forest, they cut everything down. It's called clear cutting. And then they have the big cable high lines that pull it up the hillsides to a landing. And then they go in and burn everything that's left on the ground. And then they go in and plant trees. But what they've done is they've actually destroyed every living creature's home and all the habitat for the mushrooms and all that kind of vegetation that lived in the original forest. They destroy it. It's not there anymore once they're done with the way they log. Man could definitely harvest the forest plentifully if he did it right. With trees have a cycle and they live a certain amount of time and they die, or the wind blows over trees. They're called windfalls, and it goes on and on of not destroying the forest to harvest for their wood. But yeah, the mushrooms, they've had their forever habitat, and they spread out for miles and miles. They're a living thing. The biggest living thing on this earth is the mushroom, whatever it's called, mycelium or something. Some of it goes for hundreds of miles. It's one huge connected living thing.
That's very interesting. Thank you, Tim. Yeah. Do you have any questions, anybody, for Tim, or comments?
Yeah, I had a comment, Tim. I actually watched this video that talked about how the mycelium, when it grows underground, what you see pop up is just a part of it. It actually stems for a lot, maybe not hundreds of feet, but it's very deep into the ground, and they spread for miles. They can cover an entire forest. But the thing is they were doing a study of that to see if that's why the trees all change in sync, because of this interconnected network of fungus that actually helps to let them know. And can these trees actually communicate with one another? So if you ever heard anything about that, or
Yeah, they have a connection, the trees and the different, like the matsutake, it definitely lives off of the tree's sap, and it is beneficial for the tree when the season changes. When the sap goes down, then the matsutake absorbs some of the tree's sap to live off of, and the actual fruit, the buttons, the mushrooms are a bloom of the plant, the mycelium, and they push up through the earth, through the duff, and that loosens the ground that the tree grows in. So it's beneficial for the tree roots and everything, how they work together. The forest, that's why with the dumbness of people, or the greed, that the way they deal with the forest, our resource, and how it affects our water too. Remember that when they clear cut areas, that instead of the forest being able to absorb and put out the oxygen and things, they have destroyed that. It just runs off on barren, burnt ground after they're done logging it, and that carries contaminants too in the water that isn't pure anymore. Like the forest, how it filters things, purifies the water. And it's just amazing how people treat our resources, our water, our air, our food. It's, oh, well, it's just physical. And I guess these are the lessons that we have to learn to be in harmony with life instead of discord. Like it seems like this whole planet is just a big mess.
Let's see, Ryan, you're here. You have anything to comment here about the environment today?
Vegetarian or fruit is grown up in the environment with the place and no human is there. I like I don't know call in English, but some people, especially my family, he go to the mountain or in environment and cut some special vegetarian for medical. We cut off and put in the yard to sun and dry with sun. After that, we make eat them or make some kind of tea with them and do for the health the body. When the last part of the film I saw it, it's about what kind of this we doing.
Yeah, it's a natural way to yeah, that's good. If you can bring any more information like that every week, that would be great. Or people that are doing this, actually bring them on for an interview would be great. Thanks, Ryan. We're gonna yes, thank you. I mentioned this before, I think last week, about 1491. 1492, supposedly Columbus came to the Americas. 1491 was like, and before was the Indians managed the environment. And we don't hear a lot about that, but there's a book about that and how they manage the environment. And it's not what you think. Again, now whether this book is true or not, but it's an interesting viewpoint. So yeah, this is interesting because you see how farming practices have been destroying the earth, and these people basically, they're kind of the original permaculturists. They're using methods to create self-sustaining forests where food is plentiful and shelter and clothing they can gather from these forests. And it's just another viewpoint, valuable viewpoint that we can utilize when we get going here with our projects. Let's go ahead and do the NUUU, and this is our connection to something very real. So I'll start it. NUUU. Ryan. Tim.
NUUU.
Kevin.
NUUU.
Jeremy.
NUUU.
Thanks everybody for bringing in information and sharing today, and we'll see you next week.